the worst thing to start with. Hey everyone, I'm Anna and this is the R5 Leather Workshop, where today we're going to be talking about 10 mistakes that I made in my early years of leather crafting. Now these are kind of split up, not evenly necessarily, between mistakes I did trying to sell my product and leathercraft as a craft. So they're going to be a little bit mixed up, so just be aware of that and just take what grains of wisdom you can from them. So with that, let's get started. The first one on my list is buying a beginner kit. This is probably one of the worst things I personally did, even though everything I watched and everything I tried to learn before getting started told me not to. I ignored them. I just wouldn't recommend it. The kit I bought, one, if you're buying them off of Amazon, they're relatively low quality, although to be fair, if you're just starting out and don't want to invest a lot of money, that's not necessarily the worst thing, because you won't feel like you're out a lot if you decide to not continue with the craft. But the problem is the kit I bought, only about 3 items I actually used out of the kit. The thread, I didn't even use the needles. They were not the right needles. I used the burnishing tool and I used the scratch-all. Everything else in the kit were more or less stuff I didn't need. I think there might have been what looked like a nail file in there to like sand edges and stuff. I might have used that too. But pretty much like I used probably 25% of what was in the kit and had to end up supplementing other things. The kit didn't even include stitching chisels, which I thought was the weirdest thing in the world. So with that, I would highly recommend you don't buy a beginner kit. With that being said, if you're interested in what I would put in my own beginner kit and what I think is important with links and stuff, let me know down in the comments and I'll try to do a video pulling together like the bare minimum of what you would need to get started and how much it would cost. Kind of like, this is how much you need to spend to get bare minimum started. So let me know about that one in the comments. The next one is more of a selling your product sort of situation, and that is assuming the price of a vendor fee, like how much they charge you to be a vendor at like a craft fair or a farmer's market, is directly related to the traffic that they receive and that it's going to be a quote better market. This was totally not true. I had markets that I spent $65 on per market that I made 0 sales. They were dead. The people were not advertising properly. Something I kind of expect of a vendor coordinator is that they're doing some advertising on their own. That's part of why you're paying them money, and that they are going to promote you. So if you post a picture on, say, Instagram or Facebook and tag them in it, that they will also kind of help promote you. That's not really hard for them to do. It doesn't really cost them extra money. It just costs them some time. And again, those are things I sort of assume that vendor fee is for. And also they're coordinating where you're going to be, obviously, on the spot that they've kind of reserved for where the event is going to be, and that they've done their research. So I've had that happen. I've had markets that were only $10 that were fabulously promoted and I did really well at. It's not always going to be about how you do at it, because you might find that, you know, bad weather and things like that will throw off a market. So you can't judge that, but more, how is the person coordinating it? Are they doing their job and what you expect of them? So that's just something I found. I had markets where I spent a very large amount of money and I felt like they didn't live up to that vendor fee. And I've had markets that were next to nothing where I thought it was totally worth it. So kind of do your research and don't assume that the vendor fee is going to relate to how busy traffic that event is. The next one is pricing my items. And this is kind of twofold for me. When I first had friends come up to me and go, "Oh, I love that bag. Do you make it?" And I go, "Yeah." Like, "Well, would you make me one? How much would that cost?" I was terrified to tell them what I thought it was worth, because I was afraid they'd be like, "Oh, never mind." So I tended to price stuff way below what it should have been priced. Basically, my first couple bags I sold to friends, which is how I got started selling. I think I sold them at cost. So you can't really do that. One, you might have people who are going to take advantage of that and go, oh, well, last time you charged this when you try to raise your prices. I fortunately haven't really had that. I think as my friends who have bought from me saw my skill progress, they understand the price increases. So I personally haven't dealt with friends coming back to me and saying, oh, I'm not willing to pay your higher prices. But just something to be aware of. Where you're going to run into trouble with low prices is when you are doing markets, because if people are used to you charging less, they're going to expect the cheaper prices down the road. I've gotten to the point now where I've decided these are my prices, and if people want to pay for them, they'll pay for them. And that's worked out really well for me. I tend to always have some small accessory things that are a lower cost, made from scraps often, so that there are things that are lower costs that people can still purchase. But my bags in particular, I've just decided these are the prices, and people are going to have to understand why. So that's with the pricing my items. The next one is buying tools just because someone really recommends it. I've seen this multiple times where either I've bought a tool that I think is going to be great. A good example is one of these things. This is a electronic zapper thing. It has an electrical charge that runs between, you can't really see it, but there's two little pieces here, and there's an electrical charge, and it's supposed to seal off your thread. And I'd always used a lighter. I liked this because the lighter, sometimes you have fire that comes up and kind of can like brown the edges a little bit. Then I didn't like that. So I bought this. The problem I found is that this thing sucks so much energy. It's just based off a battery. And it turned out I don't like it. I just went back to using the lighter and just it's never really been a problem since. So that's an example. The other thing is buying a tool for one project because someone requested something and you buy it, and then you're kind of like, oh wait, when will I ever use this tool again? So that kind of falls into that same category. So just do your research, think about the tools. Am I really going to use this? Am I not going to use it? Is it really worth it, the cost? So I would just say do your research before purchasing tools, especially if they're super expensive ones. Definitely do your research when it comes to that. The next one is, this is number 6, having too many products. Now this is definitely when I was doing Craft Market one. When I first started, I think maybe when you're first starting, if you want to make a bunch of stuff and see what sells, so you kind of get a feel for where things are and what you like making, I think having maybe more than you like might be okay because you need to fill out your market a little bit. But once, I'm now 3 years into doing markets, I would say slim it down and see what sells. Kind of find your niche, find your niche, and then sell those items. At one point, I probably had 20 different items on my shelves, and I've just learned to not do that. I do pretty much tote bags in maybe a couple different colors, and I might have multiple colors of things, but I'm down to probably about 7 items that I sell consistently at markets. And most of them are like small goods, plus I do some women's wallets and some bags are kind of my go-to things and what really I personally focus on. So just don't have too many products. It overwhelms customers and they don't tend to purchase as much. They'll look at stuff, but if you only have a few things, they'll really look at it and you can really talk about the quality, and I just find that that's better. So that's the other one I'd say. Number 5 is not properly researching my markets. This kind of comes back to the vendor fee thing. And I learned this in that, so I said you might go to a market, you might see the coordinators and the fee doesn't match up. Well, the other thing is you might walk through a market, you might look at pictures online of a local market and go, oh, that looks super busy. It looks like they have a lot of great stuff. I think that vendor fee is worth it. Like the research you did online makes you think it's a good market. But that's not always true, because what are they selling? What is the common thing being sold? The problem I had here was I started doing a lot of farmers markets, which were largely food. It was fresh produce. It was handmade soaps. It was other food items, sourdough bread. That was the bulk of what people were selling, and they weren't selling crafts. And the people running the thing would take my money happily and tell me, oh, I think it'll be great. But realistically, if you're going to a farmer's market and your goals are to buy handmade soap and groceries essentially, you're not going to spend $200 on a handcrafted leather bag. So I just learned really quickly, you need to research your markets, not just are they busy and well promoted, which I think is important, but are they also going to fit you and what you are selling? So that would be the other thing I would say. Go to that market, walk around, look at what people are selling. I think if you do that, you'll get a better feel for if you'll fit in at that market. Like I said, one of the farmers markets I did, the coordinators were lovely. They were very busy. They were very well promoted. The problem was it just didn't fit what I was doing. And that's why I stopped doing that market. So, Number four is buying leather without really understanding what I was truly buying. Now, there's kind of a caveat to this. I already knew I only wanted to buy full grain leather. That I knew really early on, so I never bought a piece that wasn't full grain. But I didn't quite understand some of the different tannage techniques. I did understand veg tan versus chrome tan, but even within those two categories of a veg tan and a chrome tan, there are different tanning techniques. The amounts of oils they use, how they tumble it, how they do other things with the leather can greatly affect how that leather looks and how it is to work with. And so a lot of times I'd just be like, oh, that piece is pretty, and I'd buy it, only to find, oh, this isn't really what I wanted. Oh, I wanted a stiffer leather for this project, or I wanted a softer leather for this project. Or in some cases, I just found that some I just didn't like working with. I found that when you would punch them or stitching chisels, they were stiffer for some reason. I just didn't like that leather. What I would recommend, instead of going, oh, this looks nice, it's perfect for my project, and buying a huge hide, which I wouldn't recommend early on, I would either do one of two things. I like an idiot, bought full hides or full sides. But I would probably tell you to do, if you're interested in the leather and you want to test it out, do one of two things. Either buy small panels. Pretty much every leather website has panels. They are, I think, a little pricey per square foot, but it's better to spend $40 on 2 square feet than $160 on a full side and end up hating it. So that would be my first thing. The other one I'd recommend is seeking out the cheaper bellies that you can buy. The reason I love the bellies is because they're usually, Weaver Leather Supply sells theirs from anywhere between $30 and $25, depending on the brand. And Buckle Guy sells all theirs for about $26, $27, I believe. So they're all under $30 pretty much. And you'll get a nice, decent sized piece. And you can make things with it still. So even if you don't love it, you might be like, well, don't want it to go to waste. You can make things, especially if you're selling, you can just make things to sell till you use it up. And then you'll just be like, oh, I won't buy that leather again. So I think bellies are an absolutely great option for buying cheap leather. Same thing with the panels. I'd highly recommend buying the panels over, say, samples. Samples are typically either 2x2 squares or 2x4 squares. You could maybe make a couple keychains from that, or some earrings. You could make stuff from them, but you won't really get a true idea of how it is to work with. So I'd probably still recommend a panel over a sample piece, just so that you can still make some stuff with it and kind of maybe recoup your cost if you didn't like it. So that's what I'd say about that one. Don't make a product just because one person wants it. Now, this is different from a custom order where someone comes in and goes, oh, can you make me a custom tote, roughly these dimensions? That's different. Customs are completely different. I'm talking about someone comes up to you at a market and goes, oh, do you make belts? And you go, oh, no, I don't, but maybe I will one day. And then you decide, oh, I'll make belts. And you buy everything and you make the belts, and then no one buys the belts. That's what I'm talking about, where you don't have a buyer already in mind. And you just like, oh, someone said this might be a good thing to make. And then you make it and try to sell it, and you find out really it doesn't hit your target demographic. So I did it with belts. That's why I use belts as an example. I made that mistake. So that's why I would say that. Just don't make a product because someone says you should. Customs, again, like I said, are a completely different matter. But Don't, just because someone suggests it as a possible product, don't make a bunch of it and hope that it will sell, because it may not. It just may not be your target demographic. Number 2 is just being patient with myself. The next one is being patient with myself. This is just something for me personally, it takes a long time to learn stuff. And you have to be patient with your skill. And as long as you're trying to learn and you're practicing, you're going to get better. This also went for the business side for me, because I had to be patient. And I had, sold a few things early on, and then I felt like I sold nothing. I think, a year in, maybe a year and a half in, I at one point was thinking about just giving up markets altogether and not have a website, because I just felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. But then I didn't. I kept going. I did take a break from markets because they were just burning me out. I did a lot less this last year. But I've found now, I'm 3 years in, people now know me, and I get a lot of requests from friends or acquaintances for custom work. And that's where a fair amount of my money comes in right now. To be fair, I'm more or less only making money to put back into it right now. But I'm okay with that. And that's just something I've decided with my own patience. And I had to go through this patience thing with this YouTube channel as well, learning and growing and trying to figure out where I fit there. The very last thing is thinking wallets is a good start project. They are not. They are the worst starting project ever, in my opinion. So many people on the places I did research on everywhere said wallets are a great place to start. I think they are the absolute worst place to start in making leather goods. You can disagree with me if you want, and that's fine, but this is just the reason I have a real problem with wallets being a starter project for people, is because I feel like it requires so many skills that you have not perfected yet, or maybe not even necessarily perfected, but you're just not comfortable with. So for example, many of the skills you need for leather, for doing a wallet, is you need to have pretty precise cutting skills. So compared to like the coaster, which is one of the first videos I did, you're just cutting a square and curving off ends. But you need to, with wallets, generally you have several shapes and you need to stack them on top of each other, and they need to all line up. And so you're dealing with alignment issues. You're also dealing with stitching. If you haven't done a lot of stitching at that point, you're not really sure what you're doing. You're still trying to figure out saddle stitching. You have multiple layers to saddle stitch through. Again, the coaster one was just either one piece or two pieces glued together, and you just have to stitch. You don't have to deal with different thicknesses. I just think that's easier. And then the other one, which is a big one for me personally, is skiving. So if you're skiving you have to skive a wallet typically, because as you stack more layers for like your pockets, and especially like a men's bifold, it gets real thick. And so you do need to skive all around those to make it look nice and fit properly. And to me, just that's one of those skills that takes a lot of time to learn. And I just felt like that's a skill that is so difficult. And so you're trying to make this wallet, and you're trying to stitch, you're trying to line stuff up, you're trying to cut things properly, you're trying to skive, you're trying to also potentially burnish and polish everything as well. Wallets really require a lot of polishing to look clean. And that's why I like totes. That's why I do totes, because realistically, you maybe have to burnish the top edge and some straps, but I always felt like you could kind of get away without doing that when you start, and people will still think it looks lovely. Whereas a wallet, if you don't, people will be like, oh, it looks kind of sloppy. So really just think wallets are the worst thing to start with. So that being said, if you are interested in how to do a wallet, please let me know down below, and I will kind of go through all the skills of making a wallet, and also why I find it to be a mildly infuriating project to begin with. Anyway, those are my 10 things. I hope you enjoyed them. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Tell me things that maybe you had trouble with and things that were hard for you when you started, and I'd love to hear them. And then with that, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.